last time, I swear. Finishing up. Patients and their organizations. Patient organizations have the same problems as physicians' organizations. They are often sponsored by industry and often support industry's marketing goals rather than taking care of patients' interests. Patient organizations have done absolutely nothing to stop the blatant use of patients in industry-sponsored trials. Many clinical trials are unethical because the patients don't know that they don't contribute to science, but only to the income of the sponsoring company, and because many trials or results never get published, according to the Helsinki Declaration. Authors have a duty to make publicly available the results of their research on human subjects and are accountable for the completeness and accuracy of their reports. When did we ever see a patient organization take the industry to task for failing to do this? Another example of the total failure of patients' organizations is that they often complain loudly when national bodies have decided a drug is too expensive to be used compared to what it has to offer. Whereas I have never heard any patient organization complain that the price was too high and that the drug company should lower it. It seems to be a vicious circle. A lot of what we pay for drugs goes to marketing, which includes support to patient groups and physician experts, which in turn insist that we should pay very high prices for these drugs, undermining independent organizations like NICE that provide advice to our governments about which drugs to use. Patient organizations should warn their members not to get information from drug companies or from websites funded by drug companies. Companies have found out that they can circumvent the law forbidding direct-to-consumer advertising by selling diseases instead of drugs. This is highly lucrative, and an overwhelming amount of disease websites are made up by drug companies, either direct or via some willing patient organization. Further, patient organizations supported by industry sometimes distribute marketing material from drug companies. The Danish ADHD Association visited schools and distributed leaflets written by a drug company alerting people that they might have ADHD. Although this diagnosis is already widely overused, the only type of treatment that was discussed in the leaflets was drugs, and the director of the association was hired because of her commercial orientation, with a focus on establishing partnerships with private companies. It's disgusting. That it is. Patient organizations are often set up by drug companies. Although they hide this, between 1996 and 99, the U.S. National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, a grassroots organization of individuals with brain disorders and their family members, received almost $12 million from 18 drug companies, led by Eli Lilly. It is hugely rewarding for companies to brainwash leaders of patient organizations, as they can allow themselves to be much more vocal and belligerent than the companies themselves. I have often witnessed this, and it's among my worst professional experience to hear leaders of such organizations crave drugs that I know are harmful and terribly expensive. As well, it is just too much for me. Very often they start scare campaigns that push hundreds of thousands of patients into using drugs they don't need. In 2005, the Danish Heart Foundation announced that 30,000 people would die within 10 years, if not an additional 900,000 started cholesterol-lowering drugs. An additional 900,000? There are only about 5.4 million Danes. I have a brief from 2005 with two logos at the top, one from the Oxford Health Alliance and one from Novo Nordisk. It says, the Oxford Dialogue on Patient Rights is being convened by Novo Nordisk, Denmark, under the umbrella of the Oxford Health Alliance Dialogues program. When the drug industry talks about ethics and patients' rights, it is really time to wake up and say, that's none of your business. We doctors take care of this. Large international patients' federations have successfully lobbied the European Commission to propose allowing industry to provide direct-to-consumer information about prescription medicines, which would be immensely harmful for the patients. Luckily, European Parliament has for many years fiercely opposed this proposal, which comes up again and again. In 2011, there was no beating around the bush. An International Alliance of Patients organization, IAPO, bills itself as the only global organization promoting patient-centered healthcare around the world and respecting patients of all nationalities across all disease areas, with more than 200 members in more than 50 countries, encompassing an estimating 365 million patients, their families, and careers. Healthcare companies interested in becoming members of the Alliance Healthcare Industry Partners Framework are invited to provide 4 levels of financial support: gold, $50,000 per year; silver, $25,000 per year; bronze, $10,000 per year; and standard, $5,000 per year. And what is it all about? A guide funded by Novo Nordisk sets up tips on working with various stakeholders, including pharmaceutical companies, such as businesses are key partners in improving patient health and quality of life, and an excellent source of expertise, information, and contacts. The benefits of working with the drugs and healthcare industry, according to the guide, include providing an additional voice for lobbying policy makers. Have you had enough? Luckily, there are some broad consumer organizations that are radically different and actually do work for patients. I enjoy collaborating with several of these. For example, Transatlantic Consumer Dialogue and one of its members organizations, Health Action International Europe. In 2010, the Danish Association of the Pharmaceutical Industry published data that the industry had reported 163 cases of support to patients' organizations. There should be no support at all. When asked about gifts to physicians, half of the patients were against. It's therefore not consistent to accept gifts to their own organizations. It should be made illegal for the industry to communicate with patients, for example, through ads, disease awareness campaigns, and leaflets about diseases and their treatments. Patients' organizations generally believe they can enter into partnerships with the industry for mutual benefit, which is extremely naive. Just like doctors should, patients' organizations should also consider carefully whether they find it ethically acceptable to receive money that has been partly earned by crimes that are harmful to patients. Here's what you can do. Withdraw your membership if your patient organization accepts industry favors. Ask your doctor whether he or she receives money or other benefits from the industry, has shares in a company, or is visited by drug salespeople, and if so, find yourself another doctor. Avoid taking drugs unless they are absolutely necessary, which they rarely are. Ask if there are other options and whether you'll be better also without treatment. Remember that very few patients benefit from the drugs they take. Ask if there are cheaper drugs than the one your doctor suggests. Avoid taking new drugs for the first 7 years they're on the market because, unless it is one of those very rare breakthrough drugs that offers you a documented therapeutic advantage over older drugs, most drugs that are withdrawn for safety reasons get withdrawn within the first 7 years. Remind yourself constantly that we cannot believe a word of what drug companies tell us, neither in their research nor in their marketing or information to patients. Medical journals. In 2011, Emergency Medicine Australasia announced that the journal would no longer publish ads because the prime aim of marketing of drugs is to bias readers towards prescribing a particular product, which is fundamentally at odds with the mission of medical journals. The editors added that their move was a response to growing evidence about the detrimental effects of the drug industry in medicine, including claims that the industry distorts research findings and engages in dubious and unethical publishing practices. Medical journals have generally failed us on this point. They should stop advertising drugs just like all journals have stopped advertising tobacco, as both activities are very harmful for public health. Many medical journals might not survive without ads, but so be it. There are far too many anyways, and most of them publish standard research that merely contributes to the pollution of science. A biostatistician who was a consultant to the BMJ expressed this in the title of his editorial. The scandal of poor medical research. We need less research, better research, and research done for the right reasons. Medical journals have major conflicts of interest, and they should publish the amount they get from sales of reprint, supplements, and advertising, and should check manuscripts about drugs or devices particularly carefully to ensure that they don't contribute to illegal marketing or ghost authorship. To mention just one example, editors should always ask what is behind editorial assistance in an acknowledgement, as it usually means this person wrote the paper. As noted earlier, randomized trials are so important for all of us that they should not be hidden behind a paywall. Reports of drug trials should not be published in traditional subscription journals that have drug ads and sell reprints, but in electronically published open access journals or on the web, where the protocol amendments to the protocol, where the protocol amendments to the protocol and the full dataset should also be posted. It was a great leap forward when Harvard University in Boston in 2008 made a commitment to open access publishing. The university forbids assigning exclusive copyright to the faculty's work to a scientific society or a commercial publisher. Some journals, for example, the BMJ, the Lancet, already ask for the trial protocol, and the BMJ also asks authors if they are willing to share their data with other researchers. Finally, journals should not accept editors that have conflicts of interest in relation to drug and device companies. There are very few journals that have such a requirement. For example, La Revue Prescriptive, which comes out in French and English. This journal aims at providing doctors unbiased information about inventions. It's a nonprofit continuing education organization committed to better patients' care, and it doesn't accept advertising or other outside support. This is exactly the type of journal we need to help us decide what is right and what is wrong about healthcare interventions. Here, here. Journalists. Industry's long tentacles also reach healthcare journalists. It funds professorships and scholarships at U.S. universities and offers awards to journalists that write about issues that may boost salaries. Eli Lilly and Boehringer Ingelheim have co-sponsored an award for reporting on urinary incontinence. Boehringer has an award for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, Eli Lilly and AstraZeneca for cancer, Roche for obesity, and Novo Nordisk for diabetes. Sometimes the relationship is not obvious, as awards can be sponsored for organizations that are themselves heavily funded by industry, such as the nonprofit Mental Health America. Its 2007 annual report shows that almost half of its funds came from drug companies, including more than $1 million each from Bristol Myers Squibb, Lilly, and Wyeth. Sponsored patients organizations can be particularly disruptive for rational priority settings in healthcare when they provide patients for journalists to interview to add to a human dimension to stories, which journalists love. The main problem with these compelling anecdotes of treatment success is that they reprint the exception rather than a more typical experience, misleading audiences. Since more patient organizations pocket industry money, they are not likely to provide patients for the human dimension who have been harmed by drugs. The way forward is simple. Journalism editors should not accept funding from healthcare and drug industries. Journalists should not accept gifts, awards, or any financial support from the industry they cover, and journalists should routinely disclose their own conflicts of interests and those of their sources. They should remember that they only get awards if they write stories that are good for drug sales. Further, the media should be less focused on a single murder here and there and more focused on drugs that kill thousands of patients. The public knows very little about this and virtually nothing about organized crime in the drug industry. Wake up, journalists. What a mighty chapter.